The great Bob Costas is here on the Rich Eisen Show. How you doing, Bob?
I'm okay, Rich, and I don't think that today is as much a sad day as it is a milestone, certain kind of passage. You know, Vin lived into his mid 90s, and we knew that he was in failing health. And I think this is an occasion to recall yet again what a giant he was in broadcasting and one of the most significant figures in the history of baseball. You know, you think about the great players. None of them were any better at what they did than Vin Scully was at what he did. A long life, a life well led, not just a career well led, but a life well led. If any of us can look back on our own lives as we're winding down with even a measure that much justifiable satisfaction, and Vin was a humble man, so he didn't wear it on his sleeve. But if you can look back at your own life and say that whatever it was I did that I loved doing, I did as well as I possibly could, and I was nearly as well regarded for it as Vin Scully, as both a professional and a person, that's nothing to cry about. That's something to celebrate.
Bob Costas here on the show. When was the first time you met him, Bob?
First time I met him, of course, I felt like he was part of my life, and I'll tell you a story about that in a moment. From the time I was a very young child, the first time I met him was before Game 1 of the World Series in 1982, 40 years ago. I was hosting the pregame show for NBC, the Brewers and the Cardinals at Busch Stadium in St. Louis, and Vin was doing the games on CBS Radio. And I'm standing along the first base line waiting to go on the air, and I'm very nervous. I was doing a jitters dance. You know, I'm 30 years old. It looked like I was 15. And here comes Vin Scully into my line of vision. And I say, "Excuse me, Mr. Scully, my name is Bob Costas, and it's a pleasure to meet you." And pardon me, he turns around and says, "I'll do my weak Vin Scully. Oh, Bob, of course. I know who you are. You've done very well, and I'm sure there are great things ahead." Well, at that point, I'm thinking, if I get hit by a bus, I've already led a full life.
Yeah.
Everything's good.
By the way, that's a very
Very
good
good,
Vince
yeah.
Scully impression, Bob. I got to tell you, but but I'm sure you've had many opportunities to work on it. So the story when you were a kid is what involving
Well, it's
Vin?
this. I don't really remember Vin Scully on the Brooklyn Dodgers. The Dodgers and Giants went west
Hmm.
when I was 5 years old. But we went west for a brief period of time, and there's a backstory there that I won't burden you with here. But we went west in 1960, in September of 1960. And my mom and sister went ahead, and my dad and I are driving across country, a 5-day drive from New York to what will be our new home for a couple of years in Southern California. And baseball kind of stitched the trip together. You know, you're picking up KDKA in Pittsburgh and Bob Prince, and now here comes WJR in Detroit and Ernie Harwell, and then picking up Jimmy Dudley on 3WE in Cleveland with the Indians games, and Jack Buck and Harry Carey on KMOX in St. Louis with the Cardinals games. And now we're getting closer to the West Coast. Pardon me again. And as we got to the Rocky Mountains, most of the signals had faded. And then we must have got to maybe Nevada. And through the crackle and static, here comes the Dodgers. And I remember my dad saying, "We're almost there. That's Vin Scully." So that's the first time I became
Hmm.
aware of Vin Scully. And it wasn't until maybe 10 years ago that I became aware of this. It just dawned on me. It was right in front of me if I'd ever taken note. Vin Scully and my dad were born on the same day, November 29th, 1927. You know, and that's one of those things that Vin would turn into a story. You know, the irony here is that young lad who hoped to be a broadcaster, well, his dad was born on the same day I was. And now here's that young boy sitting next to me now here on NBC. You know, he turned that into a story.
Well, and that's the beautiful thing about Vin is he the greatest yarn spinner ever during a live broadcast or otherwise? The way that
I
his
don't think you could. I
right.
don't think you could put anybody ahead of him.
Right. I mean, and his ability to weave them into pitches and then the aside of that's outside 2-1. At any rate, and just
Yeah.
continue telling a story. He was made for the sport, made for it.
Yes. Baseball lends itself to a certain kind of broadcasting. that other sports don't. But nobody mastered that platform like Vin Scully did. He worked alone, which is not some edict of his own.
Mhm.
It's a vestige of the era that he came out of. All the radio broadcasters worked alone. They handed it off to each other. Maybe one guy did the middle innings and one guy did the first few innings, but these were Red Barber's innings and these were Vin Scully's innings. So you're working alone on radio, and you learn how to fill those spaces, not just with words, but also with silence and crowd sound, almost like a conductor with an orchestra. So whether it was on television or on radio, he knew how to make that work. And toward the end, especially on Dodgers broadcasts, the people in the truck understood that too. So Dodger broadcasts were very uncluttered. There was never an extraneous replay or an unnecessary graphic or some kind of hocus pocus coming from a production standpoint. If Vin was telling a story, they knew that that was the ace in the deck. Why mess with anything else? That's what the audience came for. And he understood the rhythms and pace of baseball so well that his stories were seldom interrupted. There was a standing joke among broadcasters. Nobody ever lined into a double play to abruptly end an inning when Vin Scully was telling a story. Somehow the baseball gods would not allow that. You know, if the count had to go to 3-2 on this batter with several foul balls for him to complete the anecdote about this batter, well, that's the way it happened.
It's amazing, Bob, that you're so spot on that's exact, because I was watching last night so many Vin moments, and I would be sitting there thinking, how's he going to get this story? And it's 3-2. Like, what's going on? And you're right. Like, the baseball gods allowed him the space to finish up what he was saying. And also, he's got to be the last guy that will ever, for in a broadcast, have the station broadcasting or the outfit broadcasting cough up a minute or a minute and a half of advertising time so they could come back early before an inning starts, so he could turn his back to the field and his face to the camera and just tell a story. Like, we'll never see that again.
Yes.
We'll never see that
Yes,
again.
that was one of the features of the broadcast, usually around the fifth inning or so.
Right.
Some little vignette that went 60 seconds or 90 seconds, and then he would always end with a little wink and say, let's get back to this one. So this is just a little interlude, a little story that your Uncle Vin is telling you, and now let's get back to this game.